Hello, my name is Brian, and I'm an instructor at J10S. Today, we're going to be talking about line tapping and repair hazards. But before we get started, if you have any near misses or accidents you would like to discuss, please pause the video, discuss any near misses or accidents you may have had, and then when you're finished, resume the video. So, as we talk about line tapping and repair hazards, these are issues and things that I'm sure you all know all too well because you encounter them almost weekly, if not daily. So, we'll talk about those things and some of the issues and hazards that we face, right? So, what we're going to talk about today are blowouts due to tapping, cave ins from trenching and excavation activities. Unfortunately, utility strikes where people don't make use of one call, slips, trips, and falls on job sites, as well as in and around heavy equipment, vehicles, and in the shop. We'll talk a little bit about winter hazards, hypothermia, frostbite, trench foot, and how we can address those hazards through first aid. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about joints and strains and sprains from both exercise and static positions that we encounter while we're working on line tapping and doing repairs. So when we talk about blowouts, most of the time we're talking about water and contents that are under pressure. And oftentimes we forget that if water will, for example, cut concrete, it will surely cut our bodies, our flesh. And a lot of times it's a pretty vicious kind of cut because it seems to just rip flesh out. And so we got to be careful with that. Got to wear PPE, make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect ourselves. And of course, sometimes the blowouts happen because you're making a live tap, and there's just a technique to it and a feel for it that comes with experience, and on how much force that is too much force, and of course, what kind of material you're making the tap into. So those are the issues that was addressed through training and experience. Cave-ins, we have to worry about spoil pile slide. Nobody likes to be hit in the head, neck, and shoulders by rocks or clay coming off the spoil pile. That's why it needs to be 2 feet away from the edge of the excavation or trench. And of course, there's shear wall collapses, belly sloughs, and slip slides. So what we're talking about here basically is you approach the trench, approach it from a short side or at an angle to the corner, and look for horizontal depressions in the ground, vertical cracks as you get close enough. And it's important to realize that sometimes when you have a slough where part of the material, the dirt sloughs out, a lot of times it leaves a bell-shaped cavity in that vertical wall. So a lot of times a person will walk up to the side and not realize there's no dirt underneath where they're standing, no support. So that's a problem. Of course, utility strikes, people that refuse to use one call can create problems, obviously, with gas lines, water lines, and sewer lines. And of course, you have to go out and do the repair. And some of the people that do these kinds of things, and they call in after they've struck the utility line and caused a problem, where if they'd just exercised a little patience and used one call before starting digging, it would make everybody's life a lot easier. But each one of these has inherent hazards, gas lines, of course, any kind of static or hot work or anything that can potentially set-off gas is a problem, water pressure, and sewer biological hazards that you would encounter dealing with that. So, simply ask what are some of the repair hazards that you face every day or could possibly face? Obviously, this is a video and you can't have a whole lot of interaction. And a lot of times when we ask this question in a live training, if there's several people in the room, people don't feel comfortable speaking up. And it's not important that you tell your instructor. It's just an avenue for discussion. The truth of the matter is, you know most about the hazards you face, and it's about sharing that information, that experience through stories with one another. People tend to remember stories much longer than they do lecture type presentations. So we want you to interact with your fellow coworkers. Of course, we can all become victims of slips, trips, and falls. I know that this fellow's probably doing some work, but thought it might be a little funny to talk about slips, trips, and falls and have somebody underwater. But slips, trips, and falls account for roughly a quarter of injuries yearly on a yearly basis. That might go up or down just a small amount from year to year, but roughly that's what we have as far as injuries and illnesses that are recordable. Roughly 15% of those are fatal. I would love to tell you that there is a rhyme or a reason for those statistics, but the truth of the matter is, as a human being, most of our weight is between our belly button and collarbone, and so unless you just have excellent body control, you can't determine whether you land on your head or your feet. When we talk about winter hazards, we talk about frost bites, hypothermia. Our bodies are about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take a little bit for each of our individual temperatures. And anytime you get right around 95 degrees of internal body temperature, you're technically having hypothermia. Most of the time what happens, our body will start shivering right before we get to that part, and that is an indication that you're about to have hypothermia. Frostbite or trench foot can be an injury caused by the freezing of the skin and the soft tissues under the skin. This is problematic, as I'm sure you all know. A large portion of our bodies is made of water, and I'm sure you are also aware that when water freezes, ice expands, and when that happens in our fingers or our toes, we have some real issues, health issues. And so your fingers or toes, if they were frozen, they might itch, they might burn, you might have a pins and needles feeling, and you might be tempted to rub that tissue, and that's exactly what you do not want to do. You can cause more damage. You do not want to take a chance of thawing the injured part only to have it freeze again. That can do more damage. So if you determine that you can thaw your hand or your foot or toes, fingers, and then get to the hospital, that's what you want to do. You do not want to use extreme heat. That can be damaging as well. So you want to have water roughly 100 to 101 degrees Fahrenheit. You want to submerge the body part in that water and slowly thaw it out. Once it's thawed out, put gauze in between the fingers and toes, lightly wrap it in clean cloth, and then you can get to the hospital. When we talk about joint and muscle strains, a lot of times when you're on a construction type site or a construction site, especially if it's wet, you're going to use extra force if your boots or your shoes are in the mud. A lot of times we bend over for long periods of time. Anytime you bend at the lower back more than 30 degrees for an extended period of time, you're putting extra stress on your disc in between the vertebrae. So we want to avoid bending at the waist more than 30 degrees. So we want to try and use our legs and keep our back in a nice, natural, neutral position when we lift. and use any mechanical advantage we can. Of course, when you lift parts and you hold them in place, static positions, whether it's in a stressful position or just standing or sitting over a period of time, is just not good for the human body. And so, as you can see, we want to do our best to take care of our back and our joints, the strains of the tendons and the muscles when they're overexerted or stretched too far, and the sprains of the ligaments that connect our bones at our joints. We want to be careful with that. As we get older, our tendons, our ligaments, our muscles, they're just not quite as pliable or as they were when we were young. So as we get older, we have to take better care of ourselves. When we're young, you may feel like you're invincible, but what we really want to do is develop good habits while we're young, because most of these injuries are typically micro injuries that occur repeatedly over time and years. So we want to avoid that at all possible. Take care of our backs and our joints as much as we can. So in summary, always wear your PPE when you're tapping lines, and don't force the tap. Through training and through experience, learn what the appropriate force is. When we're trenching and excavating, make sure we slope, bench, or if need be, use a trench box to always protect ourselves from cave-ins. If you're unsure of a utility location at a dig site, verify it. Encourage people that do not work at the utility to use one call. Of course, always watch your footing. Look ahead where you're walking. Be aware of slip, trip, and fall hazards. Be aware of those things so you can avoid those kinds of injuries. It's really an awareness problem, and we need to be aware of what's going on. Avoid cold injuries. Limit amount of time in frigid water. Make sure you warm up as much as you can. Use proper lifting techniques. I appreciate your time. And if you have any comments or questions, please get in touch with your JTNS instructor. As always, I cannot promise you we know the answer to every question, because that's just really an impossible thing or a task. But what I will promise is we'll do our best to find the correct answer for you. So don't be afraid to make contact with comments, or if you have any questions that you would like to pose, and if we don't know the answer, we'll just get right to work and figure it out. So once again, I appreciate your time, appreciate your attention. Please have a nice day. Remember to wear your PPE. Remember to use appropriate controls, and keep yourself and the people you work with safe. Thank you.